And I'm gonna be high.
Good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man, yeah.
I'm a rocket man. And I'm gonna be
Rocket Man. I'm a rocket man. I wanna go to the moon.
The start point is like such a like weird amorphous thing, 'cause it's like you start thinking about it and you ideate and you incorporate and you get trademarks and then you run the Kickstarter, but you don't actually fulfill a unit from that Kickstarter for 6 months after the Kickstarter. So mid 2018 was when we sold our first bar. So that's kind of generally when I say we started.
Nice. And then so a Kickstarter, how did you know how to do that? Like, were you just text or social media savvy? I've always heard of it, but I wouldn't know how to start one.
No, I didn't know how to do anything I've done. Generally, what I do is I just like find the person who did it really, really well and call them and ask them how they did it, and then do that 4 times over and try and triangulate a path forward for us, and then do that. But no, I didn't know how to do it, and we did it in a really interesting way. I'll say maybe like gray hat way. You wouldn't read blog posts advising you to do it the way that we did it, where we basically, so there's these things called red books. I went to Harvard undergrad, and in the Harvard library there's these things called red books, which is like the alumni booklet, and everyone gives an update and, since graduating, I had 2 kids, and now I work in consulting or whatever. And then it has their email address. And so I just literally went to the library, and for like a straight week at nights, this is while I had a full-time job, just flip through and just pick. And I used image to text software that like just pulled all those emails out, made this massive database. So I had this like giant Harvard undergrad database, and then I got a login to Harvard Business School because my old boss went there and was able to they use the same email format for everyone. It's like first dot last at classyear.hbs.edu or something like that. And then so I was able to via the advanced search function on their portal, pull out 90+% of names, first and last, that had ever gone to Harvard Business School. And then I just, very basic Excel, concatenated first dot last, blah, blah, blah. And so I did that across other schools. I did it with my high school. And so I had this giant databases of email addresses, none of whom had opted in, of course.
Yeah. Kind of love it though.
And then I made a MailChimp account, and we launched the Kickstarter, and we did 10 other things. But one of the most impactful things was we just started blasting these lists. And I was like, hey, I'm Will, went to Harvard undergrad, class of whatever. And so just add that little bit of that hook, we're familiar, we share some element of our past. And hey, I launched this new thing, would mean the world if you checked it out. That's it. And we drove $30,000-$40,000 that way.
Really?
In sales right out the gate. Yeah.
And so just give me a background. So that's a little bit of the origin story. We'll bounce around, but IQ bar is what? How would you describe an IQ bar? I see there's different styles on the website. I'm aware of it, but for the audience.
Yeah. So we're really the first and only brain and body nutrition company. We're really a platform at this point. The namesake of the company and our hero product line are plant protein bars called IQ bars. And the idea is, the body piece is fiber and protein, 12 grams protein and 7 to 10 grams prebiotic fiber. And then the brain piece is things like magnesium or lion's mane or flavonoids, etc. So basically we optimize for containing things that have been shown to be good for your brain. And so it's really like a holistic solution. And then we also sell hydration products and coffee products. Same deal, body benefits as well as brain benefits to both of them.
So would you say they're in the nootropic category, but it's like a food instead of a pill? Or would you say you're a little bit different?
Coffee and hydration for sure. So we have we use 750 milligrams of magtine, which is the trademark for magnesium L-threonate, which is the only magnesium that actually crosses the blood-brain barrier and gets in your brain. So when you take like magnesium glycinate or magnesium chloride or any of these other magnesium molecules, none of them actually get to your brain. It literally can't cross
Blood-brain
the
barrier. Okay.
blood-brain barrier. There's only one molecule of magnesium that's been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier, and that's magnesium L-threonate. And the guy who created the molecule is an investor in us. It's called magtine. You can search it, but like Huberman and these other folks are really they are super bullish on magnesium L-threonate, as am I. But yeah, and then there's of course the dosage, right? So sprinkling it's not going to do much, but we use 750 milligrams. So all the clinical studies they did around it were all at 1.5 grams. So you take 2 servings of daily of IQ Mix, our hydration product, or 1 IQ Mix and 1 coffee, and you can very easily get to the like legit efficacious dose. And it's not like, Adderall or something where you're like wired. It's not a stimulant or an upper. It's more of a sort of clarity promoting, mood enhancing, helps with things like recall, etc. And so yes. And then on the bar side, we try and stay away from sort of supplementy positioning and language and all that, because it's more, food is just a different world. People don't really think about food in that way. Whereas drinks, pills, powders, coffees, like they think of them more as in that like ultra functional lens. But food, not so much. Like most people are like, I want a protein bar, and it has XYZ that is like added benefits, great. But saying like focus or like memory recall in a protein bar is actually more intimidating than it is like welcoming.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. Question for you. So you went into magnesium threonate. I might have got that wrong, but
Magnesium L-threonate, yeah.
L-threonate. I've heard Gary Brackett talk about that, I swear. But so you went into that in great detail, and you're a Harvard undergrad, but you got to be like a fitness guy as well. So what's your background, and how did you decide to start an IQ bar instead of like a traditional business if you were going to go that route?
I mean, there's so many dynamics. The first piece is I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life and my career, and a lot of folks at Harvard will go into like consulting or banking. It's kind of like the standard move because you can earn a lot of money, and it's just sort of a tried and true path. And I knew I would not be happy doing that, and I wouldn't like doing that. And I talked to people who were 3-4 years out of college and who took that route, and they didn't seem that happy. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to do that. But I had to do something, and so I worked in software, selling and marketing software to oil and gas companies. So, which was totally like random. It was a job I checked to apply to on the career services, had an interview, really liked the people, got the job. But I didn't really like it. I didn't really like software. I didn't really like oil and gas. Didn't like flying back and forth to Houston weekly. I don't really love travel. So I was like, all right, I don't really love this. I don't want to do this for 30, 40 years. I also really always wanted to start something and create something. And I've always been drawn much more towards the physical world, physical products versus digital products. And then just like quite literally speaking, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a coder. And so like, I don't want to create a company around a product that I actually didn't personally create, make, think of, devise. So I want to be like the architect of the product that I then build a company around. And so, I mean, that's, if you're not an engineer, it's like, okay, what is there? And it's a physical product. And it's the kind of thing where it's like very low barrier to entry. I've of course learned over 8 years it's insanely high barrier to success. And the food science piece is insanely hard and complicated, but it was something that I could start like quite literally in my kitchen. And then the last piece was I got really into nutrition at that time in my life. And this was when paleo was getting really big, and then subsequently keto. And I got really interested in the intersection of nutrition and cognition. What we put in our bodies, how does that affect how we feel cognitively, how we age cognitively, where are we more or less likely to get dementia if we eat pizza every day for 50 years, like all of that. Those were the combining forces.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to take a pivot here and go into, so you launched a product from your kitchen, and then did you anticipate, or did you just learn really quickly? You talked about a high barrier to success, and and I obviously, the CPG space, I think most people in that space know it's highly competitive, low margin, difficult distribution, but did you have any idea how difficult or how, I guess, entrenched the distribution, manufacturing, and logistics was going to be to get it to stores, to have it in the food distribution warehouses with the crazy logistics behind that?
No, I had no idea. As many entrepreneurs will say, like that naivete is useful because would you have done it again if you knew how hard it would be? Probably not, and that's certainly true for me. I think that the thing, which is just a more of a life thing, is when you have a really big problem, just break it into smaller problems and just solve problem A, then B, then C, then D. And so I wasn't ever thinking, oh, how am I going to solve distributing from this warehouse to every Target location? I was thinking, what's like step one? Step one is do the Kickstarter. And by the way, if that doesn't work, though, all that other stuff doesn't matter anyway. It's a moot point because
Yeah.
the market doesn't even want the product. You got to figure out if you have product market fit or a semblance of product market fit. So do the Kickstarter and then roll out a website. Can I get like daily sales going on a website and get the Facebook ads infrastructure set up and working? And then it's like, how do I layer on Amazon? Okay, that's a whole other can of worms. But like we can figure it out and get a storefront up, get listings up, start investing in ads. Like, and so it's just, and then brick and mortar, of course, is totally different. Harder in many ways, easier in other ways. But, and then each within brick and mortar, each retailer is its own specific beast, right? Like different, you have to ship to them differently. They have different inbound, like freight specs. They do promotions differently. Some are everyday low price, some are high low. So, some you're on promo some months, some you're not. So it's,
Yeah.
but it really is just incrementally solving problems. And then of course you're hiring, right? So you're building your team and you're like, at some point you have to delegate and, well, we have a head of brick and mortar sales. And so those problems that have to be figured out, I don't have to figure them out solo.
Exactly.
That's that person's domain. And so just one step at a time.
Yeah. Zoom out for me for the audience's sake. You started in 2018. Where's IQ Bar right now? I know you're in Target. You just brought that up, but give a little bit of, you probably don't like talking about yourself, but give a little bit of credence to how have you guys been doing and what stores are you in and what's your go to market right now?
Yeah, I mean, we were very much e-com first, and we're just now, this year will actually flip and be majority brick and mortar for the first year ever. But we're in over 10,000 doors and Costco, Walmart, Target, Publix, H-E-B, Sprouts, like you name it. We're in most retailers, major retailers. But still actually like our biggest channel is Amazon. And
Is that somebody just buying like a bar online, like, or a subscription service? How did you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, man, there's a whole world. And my wife who runs that, she's the CMO / head of e-com, and she's like way smarter on all that than I am. But yeah, I mean, it's everything from people knowing of our brand and searching our brand and just finding us and buying us. It's just a way to buy us if you know who we are, down to I'm searching for plant protein bars and we want to rank really high in that search and we're going to pay XYZ dollars and cents per click. And we're there, because like it's funny, you can get pretty big and you're still like, your household penetration is like 1%, 2%. It's like still no one's heard of you for all intents and purposes. And so there's just an endless sea of consumers in a big category.
Yeah.
Right? If we were selling decaf matcha tea that's ceremonial grade, well, not everyone's looking for that. But like protein bars, pretty damn broad. And so, yeah, it's just capturing those high intent buyers who are searching for highly relevant terms. And just now this year, we're getting more into the top of the funnel branding stuff. So we're doing podcast advertising, streaming TV, TV advertising, things like that. But yeah, and then D2C is its own other world, and then we even sell through Thrive Market, which is online, and iHerb, and even just
I
online.
order from Thrive Market once a month. I love that place.
Yeah.
So you guys are on
Great
there?
retailer.
I might
Yeah.
have to make sure I mix that in.
Check it out.
I get the box delivered right to the office, and then I just have that for my snacks at the office, and the kids obviously like them too, and they're pretty healthy.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a couple of ways I could take. I could double click on the ecom strategy, but you did bring up that your wife is a CMO. And so
Yeah.
husband wife business. My wife also works at Rocket, so that's pretty fun to see. How did that come about? Did you start it and she was like, hey, were you guys dating? Were you already married? Take me through how she ended up working with you alongside you.
Not married yet. When she started working for us, but yeah, I mean, we met in college. So, and I started this when I was 26. So whatever that is, 4 years out of college, and I mean, it was like any new venture. It was a crazy idea until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, I'm starting a protein bar brand. Like, that's kind of crazy, super crowded category. Why would you do that? Blah, blah, blah. Until it started picking up steam. And it's like, oh, in our first full calendar year, we did whatever, I think it was 2.1 million in sales. And it's like, oh, okay.
That's no joke, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we've doubled every year. So, I think it became quickly apparent, like there's actually something here. And then there's some things on her side where like she got, I think, passed up for a promotion she thought she deserved and wasn't getting fully valued at her place of employment. And then she was already helping, me do stuff for free just because we were together, and she has an ad agency background. And again, it's like there were a series of forces that pushed her into it. But if I was like, hell yeah, like someone I trust, someone I know, someone who's going to be all in on it, like absolutely come work on this. And also we have very different, like non-overlapping skill sets.
Yeah.
So,
Pretty important for equivalent of a co-founder, basically, because you don't want to have an overlapping skill set. Totally. So my wife was a nurse, and then during COVID, we had our second kid, and she was going to go back to work, and they were like, hey, you can work on the COVID floor, and that's about it. And so we had a newborn and a toddler, and she said, I don't want to do that. She ended up working at Rocket to do the things that I couldn't do. So she started in, maybe it was invoicing, collections, billing, but now she works in she's a Swiss Army knife, but it's the same type of thing. She has a different skill set than me. It's probably why we're married too. We're different. But take me through. So that's one example would be like your wife, but you talked about a little bit already, building a team and hiring, and you had a head of brick and mortar sales. How did you go about building out the team? And then what are some of the things that you've learned about building a team, whether if you want to take an angle of, we've talked about it a lot on this podcast with other founders, is like they built too big and then had to downsize right away. How did you go about doing it, and what you learned?
We're the exact opposite. So we're very small. We only have 8 people typing away at computers. We run our own warehouse too, so we have five folks on that side. But in terms of people firing off emails and stuff, 8 people, very, very, very small relative to the size of the business.
Yeah.
And so
it's good revenue per head metrics.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, well over 10 million per head. So why did we do that? I think a couple of reasons. Part of it's style. So we prefer the hub and spoke model of we are the hub. We have a really killers in every seat, and then we have really great third parties all around us. And there are many spokes. There's an Amazon agency spoke. There's a email marketing spoke. There's we work with a contract manufacturer. Blah 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 blah. And so there's many spokes, and it's easier to sort of hire and fire spokes, to be blunt about it, and keep shuffling around and upgrading until a third party clicks into place, and it's like, boom, you might as well be an extension of our team. I found that to be a much more nimble model. It's of course a SG&A benefit too to have a smaller team. Not necessarily, right? Because you're still paying those third parties.
Yeah, you might be able to get better margins if you had in-house, but you don't like
You might, but
it's a
you
risk.
also it's a huge risk.
Any
And
churn and then that margin goes away.
exactly, and it's more headaches, it's more emotions, it's
More
more
people.
like yeah, it's like what everyone says. Like every problem's a people problem at some point. Every problem is a people
Where it
problem.
boils down to, yep.
So less people, less problems. So also, we're just not very good at hiring. I think hiring is the hardest thing in business.
I'll second
Like
that.
we have everyone on our team now is so great, but it's like we've had some missteps. We've had some unfortunate. We've had to have some tough conversations. Certain people have not been able to grow with the business. Like it's just, and it's no one's fault per se. It just is what it is. I mean, the business is a different business every year because the definition,
Especially when you're doubling every year like you guys. That's just a
exactly
different category every year.
different category, different needs. And by the way, this applies to me first and foremost. Like I have to level up and gain new skills and be humble and have a beginner's mindset each year. And I have to look at myself and it's like, am I the right guy for my role? And I like have to be, so I like force myself to be. But no, it's the team thing is the hardest part of the whole equation. And it's like it can either make your life incredibly great or like the worst thing ever.
And it's both sometimes too, because it's like as one year you might have the perfect team, and then you add team members that you thought would be perfect, and they were the exact opposite. And then if you don't fire them soon enough, then you lose the trust of the people you already had that were great. And it's just always a balancing act. Kind of to double click though, you said it applies to you. And I think that that's a really good way of saying like, yeah, you have to evolve with the company as well. But it's kind of interesting. One of the things I always like to say to my wife is that there isn't like a playbook. No one's written a book of like what the founder should do next, maybe in marketing and sales, but not as a building a company, especially in a new category or a category like you were taking on. So I just wanted to kind of ask, how do you go about holding yourself accountable, even though it's like at the end of the day, you can't hire another CEO. This is your company. You could. Yeah, people do it that way, I guess. How do you go about making that decision of knowing you don't know the answers? How do you get your buy-in from your team when they know that you don't know?
I think
It's hard to explain.
We actually just talked about this in a team offsite. Like you have people who are external to the organization. I mean, having a good board of directors is one example, right? They're external to the organization, but they're also kind of internal. They have an internal look, and they'll tell you if you have the right people. My wife will tell me. It's one of the benefits of working with your wife. You get very honest, very
Immediate
honest,
feedback loop.
immediate feedback, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, sometimes too honest, but it's actually the right thing. That's what you need.
It's always right. It's always right, or at least it's like right to the extent that it forces me to think differently than I otherwise would have. So, I mean, like to some degree, the proof is in the pudding, right? The results are the results, and if you're helming that and getting those results, it's like, okay, well, I'm at least doing something right here. But there's other results too. Like everyone has to feel happy in their roles. Customers have to be happy. So we're for the first time this year, I think we're gonna try to attach like more concrete quantitative measures to like everything. We obviously have like our net revenue goal, our EBITDA goal, our growth goal, and then even within ecom, customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, blah blah blah. Like we have all that, but just more like organizational health metrics, as well as personal goals. But no, I mean at a high level, it's like, are we hitting the company goals? Are people like fulfilled in their roles? Do we have the right people in the right roles? Do we have enough people? Those are how I measure how good a job I'm doing.
Yeah. And it's constantly evolving. It's fun to talk to somebody that you're so far down the road. It sounds like you guys are close to $100 million company now and you're growing. And And I want to talk two topics still I want to cover. One would be you have 50,000 followers on LinkedIn. How did you go about doing that? Was that intentional? You just started posting on there. What's your strategy behind that? And how long you've been doing it? I rounded up by 2,000, but
Yeah, I'll
50,000.
take it. I'll take it. What? No, it's again, there's no one answer. It's a couple things. Number one, I like writing and I like sharing thoughts. And there's all these thoughts that pour out of you when you start a company and you're like, "Ooh, I just want to like tell someone this thing. This is like such a cool insight." And there's no, if you don't have an outlet, it's almost like, well, I actually wrote one post about this where it's like you're like freeing your mind, you're like unburdening your mind when you have a great thought. You share it with the universe, and it's like, I got that out. And so I just like that cathartic nature of sort of sharing stuff in public. But also, I do think people like having faces to brands. People like people; they don't like brands, unless you're like Nike or Supreme or whatever. But it's like, let's not kid ourselves. None of us are those things.
Yeah.
We might one day become those things, but we're not now. And so, it's just a better strategy to humanize your brand and have people know who the human is. Humans plural are behind the brand, and every company too is sort of having to become a media company.
Yeah.
I mean, this is true much more so actually on B2B. So something like LinkedIn, I mean, you can generate your entire sales pipeline just through LinkedIn if you want. It's actually less relevant and now we're B2C, but we're also B2B in that we sell to retailers and then they sell. But
Yeah.
let's just call us, for argument's sake, a B2C company. It's like actually not even as impactful sales wise for someone like me, but it has all these like wild ancillary benefits. Like I can get connected into any person who I need to. Everyone in the industry knows who we are. It helps with conversations with category managers. It just makes life easier. And like we were looking for a tagline for our brand, and we were working with an agency, and we just like weren't getting there. And I was like, you know what? Let me just try something. I'm just gonna create a competition on LinkedIn. It'll be $1,000 prize. Whoever in the comment section gives us the best tagline, we'll Venmo you $1,000. And it was killer. We got like 400 submissions. They were like, I would say 75% were good, and one of them was just an absolute banger. And we're like, that's it. For smart mouths.
For smart mouths. I love that. I saw it on your website when I was looking it up earlier today, and I'm like, for smart mouths.
Because
People feel good about
bars
themselves.
and drinks, and right, it works with solids and liquids, and it's just so good. And so it's like I couldn't do that without having an audience on LinkedIn. So it's just kind of ancillary stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a network effect. So if you walk me through your logistics strategy, we'll talk a little bit of logistics here. So you said you have a warehouse, you run it yourself. Yesterday, the reason I brought up LinkedIn first is I think your director of ops, is his name Nick?
Nick, yeah.
Yeah, Nick posted on LinkedIn yesterday something that nobody ever does if they're a shipper. He said, hey, I'm looking for a LTL truckload partner in the Midwest. DMs are open. And I'm guessing he got 500 DMs because in the freight brokerage world, it's like, that's an ICP, come on.
Yeah.
And so, but talk me through, to add on to that, maybe Nick will find somebody else that's listening to this and they'll reach out and they're the perfect fit. What do you guys do for logistics? I mean, I can guess that you have LTL and truckload. You're going to, if you're in Publix and those, you're going to food warehouses where you have these specific appointments, and sometimes it's overnight deliveries. There's some complexity to food distribution, but walk through what you guys do.
Yeah, and I'm talking out of school a little bit. I know enough to be dangerous, but certainly, we have someone who's really great on our team who handles all this. We definitely work with a freight brokerage, and we were always booking freight, always trying to pay the lowest price, but not work with the carriers that we've had trouble with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we have someone great on our team, and then I believe we like our freight brokerage. And by the way, we're booking inbound and outbound. So we buy all of our input. We own our entire supply chain.
Yeah, that's
So
unique in this space. That's
Yes.
unique because most of
Very,
them are just
very
co-packing or like they're doing it from somebody else is buying all the materials and they're getting a piece of it and shipping it out.
Totally. it's one of our competitive advantages. It's really terrible in some ways, but overall, it's the right move. I think it's similar to like setting up your own warehouse. It's really terrible at the start because it's just like
Yeah.
so much work. But then once it's humming, it's like, oh, thank God we did that. So yeah, we book a ton of inbound freight and we book a good amount of outbound freight. But every retailer is different, right? Some pull from distributors like UNFI or KeHE or LaPerry or whomever.
If you're in LTL, nobody likes the word UNFI or any of those. It's very difficult to deliver there.
Yeah, yeah. So, but then other retailers you ship direct to, Costco, Target, Walmart, etc. So, and then there are certain partners that we use that consolidate and are showing up at retailer XYZ's doors daily and
Nice.
help us hit 99% on time and in full rates and things like that. And so it's a little bit of like an amalgamation of things.
Do you
Well,
ship
yes, we're booking a lot of freight.
Do you ship the Amazon orders from the same warehouse, like the e-commerce small
No,
package
we
stuff?
do FBA.
FBA
That's
out of
its
that.
own
That's
journey,
smart.
right?
Yeah.
'Cause-
It's a separate business, honestly. It's
oh
not the
yeah.
same.
Oh yeah. No, I mean we can't. No one can really economically keep up with FBA, and so you kind of have to use FBA, and FBA is great in some ways for sure. I mean, you are getting your stuff to people in 2 days. I mean, that's wild. So sometimes one day. So, but there's all these nuances with. I got my truck to Depot XYZ in Indianapolis, but it sat in the parking lot for a week, and then it took a while to check in, and then it took a while to distribute, and so it's just you're pulling your hair out a bit on that side, and we've learned the hard way over years and years of how much sort of give we have to, how much slack we have to have in terms of shipping stuff early. But we're always learning there, and we have some kind of earned secrets and hacks we've uncovered of just like ways to get stuff to check in quicker. But yeah, no, totally. We could do a whole podcast on the intricacies of FBA.
Yeah, it would actually be kind of fun to go into that someday. I might have to do that just because a lot of our clients and a lot of the people in logistics have their own inbound LTL and truckload or outbound LTL and truckload. But then they're selling on Amazon, and like there's just so many different rules for that FBA service and approved carriers, and you have to have tracking the next day, even if it's not picked up. And then like residential delivery, which is what we do a lot of in Amazon FBA, the carrier cannot call the consumer, like the end user, to set an appointment. They have to call Amazon. Well, there's a call service, and then it always gets like a whole loop gets escalated where it's like the consumer didn't get called for an appointment because the carrier couldn't get a hold of Amazon, but the Amazon, I can't call them. Our client can only through their rep. It gets really complex to do all of that. And it's, getting stuff to people's houses. Now, obviously that's the big and bulky stuff, not small pack, but there's still challenges with both.
Totally.
So if you go back, it's kind of fun. I just wanted to call out, you talked about your model, 8 employees that are sending out emails, and you have hub and spoke. And I think it was an accident, but you talked about hub and spoke. That's literally LTL, hub and spoke model. That's how they all operate. So it's kind of fun to see an equivalency there in your business model, and you're in distribution heavily. But talk me through, you got all this revenue, you've got these employees. How did you go about fundraising all this? Like, take me through that journey. I think people love listening to that. I've gotten feedback of different people who've been on the podcast. They've said, hey, I didn't know you went through all that to get to where you're at. But as much as you're willing to share, how did you fund this? Besides, you did Kickstarter, and then what?
Yeah, I mean, we could do another podcast on fundraising as well. And I would say, for starters, like, you're a product of your environment to a degree. So there are really, really good fundraising environments, and then there are really terrible fundraising environments. When I started in 2018, it was quite good, meaning there was a lot of dollars flowing into consumer goods startups, and it could, like, our first real valuation was $4 million, and it's like, that's just kind of what the market was bearing. That wasn't a multiple of sales. It's just like, if you can cobble together a good product and a good team and a good idea, like, the market was rewarding you with a $4 million valuation. And then after that point, it really it did become a function of multiples of sales and growth rate and things like that. But so first thing is like environment. So know what environment you're in. Talk to many people who have raised from similar startups that have raised like recently, call it in the last 12 months, and just like understand what's possible. The second piece is decide if you want to fundraise. Like you can technically bootstrap certain businesses, but my take is in 99.9% of consumer goods, you just need money. And if you're gonna really bootstrap, you're just gonna move so slowly that it won't be worth it. It's worth it to sell a slice of your company to move 5 times faster,
especially in CPG.
especially in CPG, and you have to value your time, right? So it's like, do I want to bootstrap, but it's going to take 30 years, or like, do I want to sell 20% of my company and I can do this in 10 years? You know, so it's value your time. But all of that said, we as a team are always like obsessive about capital efficiency. So we were always raising the least amount. It's funny, a lot of people try to raise the most amount possible.
Yeah, that's the exact opposite I've heard from others. So interesting.
We were trying to raise the least amount possible such that we could get to the next revenue step change such that we can then raise the least amount possible at that moment at a higher valuation. And so each time you're selling off a chunk of the company, it's less of the company per dollar. And that worked out phenomenally well. Like we still control, my wife and I still control the company. We've raised $10 million.
Kudos to you guys.
Yeah. So now, but we had to slice and dice that $10 million like very carefully. We raised like $600K in year 1, and then in year 2 raised $1 million, and then a year and a half later raised $2.775 million, and then a couple years after that raised $5.5 million. And we were making sure we were leveling up the valuation of the company each time, such that $10 million later, now we like turn profitable, still control the company. And that was always the goal, like never lose control of the company.
Yeah.
Because I got into this not to answer to people, but to call the shots for better or worse. So,
well, in your case, for better. I do think to kind of drill into that a little. So the exact opposite effect happens in freight with the same type of funding rounds. I mean, do you know Convoy? Have you ever heard of Convoy?
Yeah.
So Convoy famously did the exact opposite of your strategy, which is they raised as much money as possible in 2022. And they raised like $900 million at a $3 billion. No, that was Project 44. Maybe it was like $500 million. But it was a crazy amount at a $3 or $4 billion valuation. And they weren't even doing, I mean, they said they were doing maybe 300 million revenue, but I don't think they even were doing that. And it was a technology sell, but they ended up they got so washed. And it was a product of the environment that they were in. In 2022, in logistics, you could raise money if you had a pulse. And if you were really attractive and had a lot of revenue and you had tech, you could raise so much money. And they ended up having like, I don't know if they ever did go bankrupt. I guess Flexport ended up scooping them up, but it was only because they couldn't make the next round. And I think that isn't talked about enough, is that if you raise too much in one round and you can't get to that valuation you have to in the Series B or C or A or seed or pre-seed, whatever it is, if you can't get the valuation, then you can't raise again without losing control of the company, because then you get preferred shares and you get diluted.
Yep.
And that didn't happen to IQ Bar. And I think that I talk a lot about VC in freight because I just think it's technically speaking, it's a poor strategy because the multiples aren't there. So a freight brokerage trades at 5x if they're healthy of EBITDA.
5x EBITDA, yeah.
Yeah. 3 to 5x is like an agent. And then a really good brokerage might get 5 to 7x. A tech enabled can get closer to 10. And then like a final mile specific, there was a company that Forward Air sold their final mile unit to Hub Tech for like, I think it was like 20x, something like that. It's 19x EBITDA. But that's like the highest crazy valuation ever. And that's just off of EBITDA. And in freight, EBITDA is not very good because it's buy sell margins. And so you can't ever attain what you need to get to. You end up getting washed and it's a horror story over and over. But you were talking when you raised at 4 million, and this is getting technical, but why not? You live this. When you raised at 4 million, it wasn't off of EBITDA, it wasn't off of it was just that's the value that the investors were willing to give. And then obviously it's gotten more sophisticated. But do you guys in CPG, do they go off of EBITDA? Do they go off of sales multiples? What's the standard?
It totally depends on the environment. So from like 2011 to 2021, it was like total boom times. Everything was off revenue, everything in CPG. And so you were raising, I mean, early stages you could, again, those like you have 100K in revenue or whatever,
Yeah.
it's just not it's just not based on revenue even. There just is a going rate because investors want you to own a lot of the company too, right?
Yeah.
So it's a two-way street because they want you to like wake up every morning fired up to win and be motivated to win. And so it's not like they want to just gobble up half the company and then you're not a good operator, you don't care. So it's a balance. So yeah, that first number just sort of fluctuates and maybe it'll be 5 million out the gate. Maybe it's 2 million. But there is just a going rate. It's a weird one, that first check you raise. But yeah, I mean, we our second valuation is 12 million and it was 6 times sales. Not totally out of thin air, but it's like why 6 times versus 7 times versus 5. It was,
Yeah.
I think we just decided how much we wanted to raise and how much we wanted to sell the company, and we found investors who would do it. And frankly, like angels are more likely to do that than financial institutions. So our first 2 rounds were 100% angel investors. And of course, by the way, like they're all going to absolutely crush it. That wasn't always a given, but that is what's going to happen. So, but they gave, I guess, healthy valuations up front. But every time it went down by an X, so it was like 6X, and then it was 5X. Our first financial institution we raised at a 5X sales. Because EBITDA is just not a thing in consumer goods until you get volume. So we didn't flip profitable till last year, and you have to be moving like 30 million units, whatever the unit is, bars, cookies, crackers, what like call it 30 million, or like let's just say 30 million in sales. That's when you have economies of scales where you can flip profitable.
Yeah.
So no one's expecting you to be profitable earlier, and so it's not EBITDA based. It's like revenue and growth. Once you do scale up and then you're trying to exit, then it really matters the environment, because it was for a while there sales, net sales based, but today it's really EBITDA based. So we're living in your world now. It's just the multiples are higher. So it's like call it 10 to, in the freakish high end, 25. But like a really good outcome would be like 15 times, 16, 17 times. But yeah, we're living in an EBITDA world now, which I actually think is a good thing and is healthy. I mean, it's sort of, it's a little bit morbid, but like it kills off the brands that shouldn't have existed, quite frankly.
Yeah. That maybe had the high
Artificially
revenue
there.
from things that maybe aren't sustainable, influencer deals or something, but it's not a core. They're just co-packing. There isn't a real supply chain. There's not a set inventory. They're not going to scale. But they have a ton of sales out the gate. I think that part of it, like I see IQ Bar, obviously you guys have some competitors in the space, but in the supplement, the protein space, I don't know very many brands at all that run their supply chain and order their own materials and go inbound like you guys. So that was almost
partially it's because it's a cash trap business and cash flow is everything. And what's the biggest way to ding your cash flow?
buy inventory.
Buy all your own inputs, because we have ingredient inventory that's sit on our balance sheet as well as finished good inventory, and a lot of it. So it's not good for cash flow. So you have to be able to withstand those cash flow hits. How? Well, at some point raise money, have a high enough gross margin, flip profitable, and you're still living hand to mouth. I mean, we still live hand to mouth.
Yeah, you got to sell, or otherwise, if you guys aren't selling through on the shelves, you lose a big retailer. You don't have the Amazon, you don't have e-com, and if sales shut off, that's not an option.
But gross margin is ideal. So we optimize for gross margin.
That's smart.
How do you get gross margin? You buy all your own inputs. You negotiate directly with all the suppliers. You save on material markup fees that your co-packer would charge you. So we optimize for EBITDA and gross margin. And so, but again, that's like a privilege because you have to have the
You have
cash
to get there.
and the profitability. You have to get there. So, but we were, to be just totally honest, we were forced into it a bit because of COVID. So we did have a turnkey model where we would just buy the finished good from a co-packer, and then COVID hit and we couldn't get anything. You can
You're
get
at the middle of the line and you couldn't get it because everybody else was ahead of you.
couldn't get wrappers, couldn't get certain ingredients, couldn't get cardboard. It was insanity. And then the co-packer would be like, hey, I called the vendor and like, I can't get it. And it's like, actually, I know you could. You would just have to call 10 people, beg, pay a markup, whatever.
Bribe.
But you're not going to do that. I'm going to do that. You're not going to do that. And so we're like, screw it. We're going to take everything in-house, mostly as a survival mechanism, so we can make product. If you're not making product, you don't have a company. So we took that over, and then we're like, oh, this is a lot more work, but this is going to get us to EBITDA positive quicker, and it did. So we were forced into it, and I'm glad we were.
Yeah. Taking a step into like you talked about a product of your environment for fundraising, but also like obviously not getting political, but the Make America Healthy Again and all of that. It seems like there might be a shift in more and more people are going to be getting bars like IQ Bar than probably ever before. And it just seems to be a national pulse thing. Do you guys, I'm going to take a step back even from there for like Rocket, when venture capital money is flowing, that's good for our brand. We didn't raise any, but all of our customers who are in e-commerce do. And if they have their funding rounds, we ship more product. So I'm optimistic about the next few years here because more money is going to be injected. The consumer is going to buy more furniture and home goods, and the companies are going to get their funding rounds. So I'm going to ship more product. But how do you look at this next 4 to 8 years as far as like the pulse of health in America? And do you guys see that as a tailwind?
Two very different things there. Yes, to the latter one, yes. Like seed oil free is becoming a big thing. Great, we're seed oil free.
Yeah, you beat people to that.
Yeah, and yes, more of a health. Like we will always benefit from a greater focus on health and wellness because we're a health products company. We will always benefit from a increased interest in protein. We are predominantly a protein snack company. So yes, I mean, you have these micro moments where you really hit a heater because you get just an unexpected tailwind, like keto, for example. Our bars are keto compliant. We didn't really see keto coming, and we didn't see the scale of keto coming, but damn, did we benefit from it. So that was just helpful. So yes, is the answer to your second question. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I have like the opposite perspective on the VC dollar thing. I want everyone to die and no one to get money other than us, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
Like more competition is worse, right? For obvious reasons. And so we're like, we want to be the last one standing. Like because when there's so many dollars flowing in, it's just like you're competing over the same Facebook eyeballs. And everyone is just artificially just throwing money into the machine. It bids up everyone's costs. It makes it worse for everyone. And then these companies flame out and die. And it's just like, well, you just jacked up my cost and other people's cost and then like flamed out and died. But it's like, you never had to exist in the first place. If you weren't a serious person and company, and it's like, it's so... So for you it's great, right? But for me it sucks. So it's kind of funny in that way.
Yeah, as soon as you started talking through it, I was like, that first part, if VC money flows again, that's all new competitors to his brand, and it's free money floating out there, but that's diluting you guys. But I think that you'll have an advantage, especially with the keto, paleo. I used to be a big time CrossFit guy, so I was always paleo, and like I was really into that scene. Our CTO Troy is still a big time CrossFit guy. He owns a CrossFit gym on the side, and his wife runs it, and he's like the healthiest dude I ever met. So I got to get him some of these IQ bars probably.
Yeah.
I'll send some to him now. But The reason I ask it is that like the macro environment matters, but it sounds like, or not sounds like, you've built your business since 2018 was first bar, but 2017 was like the Kickstarter and all that stuff. You've been in like, this will be your third cycle already, because 18 was boom time. Then you had COVID, you pivoted, and then 2022 was like stuff was probably going crazy, and then it had slowed down again, and maybe it'll go different. But
Yeah, 22
you,
actually stuff got really bad. So yeah, like beginning of 22, things were frothy, and then the market like got smoked, and VC dollars were not flowing in, and even though there were dollars on the sidelines, nothing was getting deployed, and so actually the pain really set in 22. And then now maybe we're headed into another boom time. I mean, it's unclear.
yeah, you don't know. That's the other
You
thing.
don't
You
know,
don't know when it's going to happen. So do you
and it
run it
might
in the
be.
macro or in the micro?
And it might be boom times for certain. Like if you're an AI company, it's boom times. Like consumer good, maybe not. Still, VC dollars are not flowing in. Again, I like that because we're self-sustaining and profitable. But that's just selfish, right? If I was
Yeah.
starting a company, I would hate that because I'm like, I need VC dollars. So
Yeah.
everyone's going to have a different perspective based on the life cycle of their business. Honestly, though, like building a good fundamentals business is cool in 2018, it's cool in 2022, it's cool in 2025, like it's always cool. So just do that. Like that's the advice I give other people is just look, take advantage of a frothy environment if you're in it. If you can get cheap dollars, go get them in a smart way and don't get too many of them, but like don't not be opportunistic when you should, but focus on the main thing, which is unit economics. Like how do I build a good business that's default alive, that does not need artificial life support, and you will be fine in any environment. And also you'll have optionality. Like optionality is a lot of people are like, what do you optimize for? Growth, EBITDA, that. No, it's always optimizing for optionality. So we could do A, B, C, or D, and we're gonna like look at the
Love it.
chessboard and pick the best path. But you can't get optionality if you're not profitable.
There it is.
So
I mean, it's really refreshing to hear you speak like that in the CPG space because it's always, I mean, you already said it, for the first 6 years, you can't even turn profit until you get economy of scale. But like, it's really wise of you to say it. And I'm glad that you're on the show talking about it so people can hear somebody who's building a huge company with low cost, high margin, and profitability in mind, because it does give you the best option to say, hey, we could hire, we could scale up, we could take an investment, we could stay the same size we are, we could change partners. That's the optionality. You kind of talked about it. It's the same theme you talked about with not wanting to lose that control of the company as well. You want to have optionality. And, after 8 years now, or going on 7 or 8 years for you, you obviously have the confidence of your team and yourself that you're going to make the right decision for IQ Bar. But if you have 8 options or 5 options or 3, that's better than just saying, hey, we need to get revenue, so let's change our mind about something because we have to make that next round. I think that's where people get trapped. So, man, I appreciate you coming on here. I always ask this question. There's 2 more specifically about your business. Would you share, how do you run your tech stack? And I'm talking like, how do you run payroll and HR and onboarding through, how do you like collect money from companies? What's invoicing software do you use? Super tactical info.
I don't even know some of the I know we use QuickBooks and Bill.com, and we looked at doing an
Okay.
ERP, and we actually started implementing one and did it and then reversed it because it was such a shit show. And I'm glad we did. But yeah, we use Bill.com and QuickBooks.
That's refreshing to hear. People think QuickBooks isn't like, and I'm like, you can use
No,
QuickBooks
you
for
can scale a
large
company.
businesses.
Absolutely. And I know that because when we were going through that thought process, I called a number of people who built 9-figure revenue businesses, and they were like, we ran that business on QuickBooks through to 200 million in sales. And I was like, okay, that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, the people shit on QuickBooks. It's like, no, it's actually can be quite sophisticated with the right jockey on the right horse. So Um, and then yeah, I mean our website's on Shopify. There's a lot of software that our third parties use. So with our Amazon agency uses a whole series of softwares for bid optimization and things like that. We use Gusto for payroll.
So do we.
Yeah, which is
I like the tool.
fine. It's good. It's annoying with hiring people in other states.
Yeah.
Really clunky, and
You
have
got to
to
get a
use.
tax ID for each state, and unemployment
Yeah.
insurance rate for each state,
Oh
and then you
man,
have to.
and certain states are like way more of a pain in the ass than others on that.
Some of them you have to mail stuff. You can't even do it
Yeah,
online.
mail stuff and
Been
get
through
mail
that.
stuff. So, but I don't know how much of that is Gusto's fault. I don't know how much of that is automatable. I also don't know. So, but yeah, it's better than ADP or whatever the other alternative is.
Yeah.
Gmail, good old Gmail.
G Suite. I like it.
Yeah, G Suite. Yeah. Slack is like the lifeblood of communication for us. If you can Slack it, that's a hell of a lot better than an email.
Yep.
Because it just keeps that inbox integrity. So we Slack a lot, and then like Google Meet, which is pretty damn good. I'd take that over Zoom or Teams, like just attached to every meeting. Like love Google Meet. People shit on that. I don't know why. It's awesome for us.
It's my favorite one. I hate
yeah.
Teams. I will do Zoom, but Google is our standard.
I'll do it, but like it's easier if it's in the browser and I click a button. Like, and I don't. Have to
Yeah, I don't want to download it. I always have to click
Less is-
twice and say continue on browser.
Less is better. I don't know. I'm probably missing a few, but
So then you obviously you have team members deploying that. Your wife's probably helping with some, and your directors, and you're like, but question for you would be, how do you look forward, and like do you lean on your vendors, right, your third parties, to kind of be on the cutting edge of like the next, maybe it's a warehouse management system or it's an ERP, if you think you have to have that? Is that your strategy, or how do you think about
yes,
that, implementing tech?
yeah. I mean, sometimes we'll be
It's a
like,
smart
"Hey, why
model.
aren't you using this?" Or "Do you use this?" Or, but for the most part, like if you pick the right third parties, they're thinking about this internal to their business, and they're thinking,
Yeah.
what's the absolute best tech stack to best service our clients. And so I think it's mostly just pick the right third parties because they're gonna think that through and make the right decisions, and that's less decisions that we have to make. So, yes is the answer.
On the third party front, is a lot of your day to day, or I guess I would say week to week, is that the relationships with the vendors and third parties? Then is that kind of your role at IQ Bar? And how do you've created a hub and spoke. You talked about sometimes it is easier to fire a vendor or a third party than to in-house fire somebody and go through the whole process of severance and PTO and payouts and whatever state you're in. You're in Florida, so maybe not as. I'm in North Dakota. It's a little
No, but we
easier
hire
to.
all over. We have people.
Okay, so yeah, so then you have to figure out the rules of Cobra and all that anytime you fire somebody, and you have to go through the right process. But how do you go about building a relationship with a third party so that they are just as invested in your growth as you are in theirs, and it's symbiotic? What's your strategy on that? You don't want to, or do you go about it, like with a whip and say, hey, our business is so important to you. If we pull our business and bid it out, you're not going to like that? Or do you go with the full opposite approach, or somewhere in the middle?
More of a whip than a carrot, I would say. I mean, we pay well, like to third parties, in my opinion. And so I'd rather pay well. And it's like, well, the benefit of us is obvious. Like we pay you a lot of money every month, and we'll sort of negotiate, but like we'll pay fair prices, but we're just like very clear about like expectations, and it's not personal. It's like it's just we can't afford to pay. I mean, literally couldn't afford to before we turned profitable. It's like we can't pay you 30 grand a month, and then XYZ happens, and we'll just die if we did if we did that times 5. Like we'll die. So it's helpful, I guess, in some ways to be in survival mode because you have to ask a lot of your partners. But no, I mean, there's like leeway. I mean, partners make mistakes. We make mistakes. You got to see the forest for the trees and
Yep.
think bigger picture. And we have several third parties who we've been working with now for 3 years and 4 years. And by the way, we're getting the whip cracked on us by retail partners and
Yeah. If you're in
and
Target,
Amazon,
Walmart,
and
Costco, those,
like
yeah.
it's not like you're safe. Like everyone's getting the whip cracked on them to some degree.
Yep.
So we need to. It's just be firm and be like clear about expectations and. But no, I mean you don't want to be an a-hole about it, and you want to be not really unpleasant to work with. And but honestly, like I don't know, we don't do a lot of like buddy buddy, let's go play golf together type stuff. It's like this is a business relationship. Like let's be clear about expectations, and we're gonna pay you a lot of money, and we expect a lot.
You're
out
going
of
to
you.
perform. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so we have lots of clients, but over the years, I've worked with certain companies that had really excellent leaders. And I think a lot of the people in freight brokerage or in the logistics space think of like building relationships and going golfing and going on site and building a buddy buddy relationship as the smartest plan. And maybe that's right. I can't say yes or no on that, but I will say anecdotally, the brands of ours that grow the fastest and then by default ship the most with us, because it's like you could go have a customer acquisition strategy and we create predictable, repeatable revenue. But if you don't lose customers and then they grow, that's the actual strategy to win in logistics, is that the brand that you're working with grows 100% over 3 years. You didn't have to get a new customer even. You just got growth from your current base. And that's how we think about going to market, is that if we can just stay with our brands and keep churn under 5%, when in logistics it's 50%, then we're going to win. And of course, I'm a sales guy, so we're always getting new brands. But if you look at it anecdotally, the best brands that I've worked with have leaders who are firm, almost sometimes intimidating in a boardroom, because they expect a high level of performance from us as a company, but they're always fair and they pay their bills on time and they expect us to perform, and they allow us to make mistakes. We also hold them to account if they, had unrealistic expectations. But I'm always looking for brands like that rather than, oh, is the CEO of that company my buddy's friend who I could kind of use that relationship with, because it ends up being, they're going to find another buddy anyways.
Yeah, totally. Like it's like my earlier line of a business with good fundamentals is cool in 2018 and 2022 and 2025. Competence and results are cool in any environment too.
Always.
Like buddy buddy stuff comes and goes, relationships come and go. Like competence is always cool. So just it's a way better, sounder foundation to build on, of just like we deliver and we expect you to pay your bills on time, and like you can ask of the client too.
Yeah.
So I think it's the right
Well,
approach.
I took up a lot of your time. I appreciate you coming. I have one last question. I ask everybody this. Can you share a mistake you made that you think is not fundamental to how you got here that you could have avoided? So there's obviously mistakes we make about hiring and firing people, maybe, different reasons. And you kind of have to learn those, you take your lumps and learn that to be an entrepreneur. But is there anything that you did that was just kind of stupid, and somebody could be listening to this and say, I won't do that? That's what we're trying to get to.
I think I was stupid I'm like very cheap, and that I think that served me well most of the time. But sometimes that's like it's cheap to a fault, and it actually hurts us financially, But and so like very like early on, I would not want to hire outside help on like that would drive product excellence, because it was a consultant and they charge a really high rate, and I'm like, I'll just do this myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just dumb. The difference, especially as it relates to things that are the lifeblood of your company, product being number one, team being another one, and it just is worth spending 20 grand more, 30 grand more over the course of 6 months to fundamentally improve a lifeblood element of your company. And I always resisted that, and I regret resisting that.
That's super tactical.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thanks for sharing it. Well, I appreciate your time today, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Let's Talk Logistics. I'm just going to hit end on the recording here, Will.